Let's get more on this from DW ethics correspondent Martin Gack. Welcome, Martin. We just heard the bishop there saying mistakes were made, but this does not sound like a mistake. If you believe what's in this report, this was a system. This was the system.
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite clear that this doesn't cut it anymore. The church is not entitled to talk about mistakes at all. One of the things that the grand jury sort of brings forth is that essentially the church, at least in the state of Pennsylvania and within the diocese, particularly Pittsburgh, which is 1/3 of where those people charged are from, was essentially operating as a criminal organization. And this is actually a very damning charge. So that is to say, there was a system for both protecting these people that evidently was perpetuating the problem. So, you know, I think that apologies is something that, well, just quite simply has no place in this conversation anymore.
And we heard briefly in the report only 2 charges against more than 300 abusers, and their names are known, so why not more charges?
Well, some of these charges go back 70 years. So, I mean, I think that...
And there's a statute of limitations.
There is a statute of limitations, and there are only 300 cases in this case that had been put on the table. But, I mean, presumably we're going to see a lot more, and presumably we're going to hear about a lot more victims. Now, the issue is that because of the policy of secrecy that the church officially adopted, actually, the previous Pope Benedict has essentially said that anybody that could be caught turning information to national authorities or legal authorities would be actually excommunicated. Because of this kind of policy, it made it almost impossible to actually track perpetrators through. This means that, you know, the possibilities of bringing charges were actually quite reduced.
So this is a report from the grand jury released by the state's Supreme Court. What happens next?
Well, I mean, this is a state prosecutor, and this will actually be moved. Charges will be brought. But what is interesting at this point is that this is happening in several places around the world. So Australia is now, has charges as is putting on trial Cardinal Pell. But more interestingly, perhaps, over the last 2 days, a prosecutor in Chile who is investigating abuse cases has requested from the Vatican that they turn documents to the prosecution. I think that this is essentially the end game, is whether the church from the very, very top, that is to say from the Vatican, will actually start turning documents and evidence to national authorities that can prosecute cases. Keep in mind that it's very likely that these cases are still going on. So this has not come to an end. These policies are essentially still in place.
So you mentioned then that from the top there was this policy of not turning over documents to state authorities. If criminal cases are being brought around the world, can the Catholic Church be forced to hand these documents over?
It depends where, and in many cases, no. The answer is simply no, because there are many situations, many legal contexts and frameworks in which, for instance, confession is actually protected. So if a priest goes to, say, his bishop and confesses that he has molested a child, that is actually protected. The other problem is that the church itself has actually developed a policy, as I was saying, of not disclosing these things to national authorities. So it would have to change the policy within the church, and we're talking about a massive organization, in which they actually begin to say, yes, we're turning these things to national authorities. This would have to come from this Pope.
We'll leave it there for now. Martin Gack, thank you.
My pleasure.